Welcome to Podcast IRC, conversations with Indigenous scholars to advance understandings and gain new knowledge, hosted by the Indigenous Research Center at Snyeʔstn College. Okay, so that was a scout song, and apparently, in the olden times, there was a scout sent out every day. Now, I don't know if this was true, like when our ancestors or what have you were in their winter camps or their more permanent camps, but apparently this was a pretty well established routine of sending scouts out, and the scouts returning and reporting their news. And the important part of, I think, this song is it's a testament to how important songs were in daily life. So if this was a daily routine, this procedure would have followed every time a scout came back. So the scout would come back, people would see him and he'd be zigzagging his horse, loping his horse back into camp. And so a group of men would start singing this song, this Snyeʔstn, it's called the scout song, and they'd start parading out toward some predetermined spot. And this spot was predetermined by an individual who had a gift of some sort that was associated with that song or with this way of telling this news. And the person in charge would throw a blanket down and indicating to the scout that that's where he was to stop, and they'd all be singing this scout song. And as this way proceeded, a number of people from the camp, the remaining people or whoever was around, would also join in, and they'd be singing this song while the scout was coming in. And he'd be making particular sounds that would indicate what he had seen. So even just the communication of these sounds, people kind of already gained an idea of what was seen or what the news was. So when the scout gets to the blanket, the leader of this scouting way would come up and hit the guy with the stick, and then he'd tell his news. And then they'd report the news of what they had seen. And I guess the important part of this song and of this whole procedure was, it was a whole camp affair, and everybody would join in on the singing of this song. And I think it marks an important piece in the research puzzle, this emerging research puzzle of what purpose do songs play, and more importantly, what is our method of what's our future method or mode of communicating important news, particularly to our tribal people, but also to our Indigenous academic community. So that's the question that I'm posing with this song is what's in store for us? What do we have? You guys all been part of communicating things that you've learned, both academically and both in your tribal communities. So what do you do then to kind of emulate a traditional or tribal way of communicating that knowledge? Go. Anybody. Go. Hit it. Don't be shy. You got it. Can you guys hear me?
I'm just going with
this
it.
happens every time.
I know.
We always are shy for the first minute. Everyone's like, I don't know who's gonna do it. We should just draw straws before we go on our podcast. All right.
Wait a second. Are you passing the talking stick? Oh, stop
I'm going to
it.
pass the virtual talking stick. Aaron has one for us.
Wait, I'll volunteer.
Okay, Sarah's going to volunteer.
Okay. Yeah, I'll
Okay.
volunteer. Well, and I think why it's always so hard to chime in on this first point is you bring so much knowledge on these songs, and it takes a moment to take it in,
Right.
because at least for me personally, like a lot of the information that you share during our intros is new to me,
Right.
so it's hard to kind of jump right in on it. But to get to the communication piece, well, and I'll just say thank you, Shandine, for always sharing and starting us off on the right path. But this communication piece, especially that story you're saying, it's much more of an in-person dialogue where it's in the moment, it's present, it's really relevant. And in so much of the ways that we communicate in academia today is through peer-reviewed publications, and it's on paper, and it's, you can pull it up and it's for the masses. You don't have to be there present. So, they're just two totally different modes of communication.
Yeah, that's true. And even with this with the pandemic, we've kind of seen a little bit of shift in that norm, because I've attended at least 3 dissertation defenses that I otherwise would not have been able to attend. So just being able to widen that community or broaden that community of listeners has been I think something that's been kind of important.
Congrats, by the way, Selena.
Thank you.
Yeah, again.
Yeah, speaking of dissertation defenses,
We got
a
dissertation defender. Should get a shield for that, like a whole shield.
Like a Wonder Woman shield.
You defended that.
She defended it.
Yeah. It's always a funny thing whenever I heard that word, you got to defend your dissertation. Like, okay, I pictured building a little fort, and my little pile of papers back there, and I got like a yeah. I got like a rifle waiting for somebody to come. I'm going to defend this dissertation I did. So yeah, maybe Selena can let us know some of her experiences, and particularly because your dissertation was data from your community. And I guess if we situated this idea of this scout song back into today's time, how would you, in a traditional way, inform your community of these things that you found out?
Well, I think in a traditional way, I would have probably my dad or somebody who had the right to speak in public share the information that I found. I guess I would, in a traditional sense, that's the way I would do it. It's funny because it is funny to think about, because the way we do it now and the way we would do it at home is so different. And even being in this pandemic and being, having to stay away from our families and all of that, I was thinking about after defending, like, I felt very fortunate for people to a lot of my friends were like posting, Selena defended this. We're proud of her. And that felt good, because if we were all together in a physical space, it would have been other people who were celebrating me. It wouldn't have been appropriate for me to be like, oh, look what I just did, or, and so I think it's interesting though, because there's, I don't know. Now I'm just rambling.
No, you're right.
That's good. It's all good.
Yeah, let me stop there.
So in a way, so it kind of expanded your what would I call the availability of witnesses to see, and then for them to report what you did, rather than having a really small, tight-knit people in a room, mostly your committee and whoever could show up. Yeah, so it really broadened that, and I think that's a really important part of this this indigenous way of doing research in a modern time, is that we allow witnesses to see what we're doing, so that we don't risk this really taboo thing of bragging about ourselves, so that somebody else can do it for us. I think that's what you were saying. Is that
it is?
Because right?
I think in academia, there's so much of that self-promotion that's required. Yeah, and we're taught the
Yeah.
opposite, or at least
Yeah.
as a Abzaligat person, I'm taught the opposite. And so but then to do something, accomplish something so personally huge and not really be able to talk about it that's kind of hard too. But then that's where your friends and family come in, like they can celebrate you, and then it still feels okay. It doesn't feel like bragging or promoting
Yeah.
your
Right.
accomplishment, your own accomplishments.
Right. So would you say then that this idea of having a virtual defense, or even opening up a academic defense to a larger virtual audience would be in alignment with more of a traditional way of disseminating
I think
information?
so. I think knowing that I was going to present this, that I was inviting people who weren't from the academic, weren't connected to me academically, but were connected to me personally, was part of the accountability of what I was about to present, because I knew that people like yourself and Aaron and Marty and my mom and my sisters were going to be listening to me, and my husband and my children. And if I couldn't just say whatever, where if I was in the closed conference room door, I could say whatever, and I wouldn't, not that I would, but I could. And
Yeah.
there'd be no accountability
Yeah. Yeah.
there, to a certain
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. That's it reminds me of this story of this. I grew up with I grew up with a couple people. They were kind of considered like my brother and sister, and this sister of mine, she had a father who lived in the East Coast, and occasionally she would go visit them. And she said on one of her visits, it was just a bunch of non-Indians, and they were curious about her, where she lived, and they said, well, do you know your language? And she was too embarrassed to say that she didn't. So then she said, oh yeah, I do. And said, oh, show us. And so she said, oh,
Blah, blah, blah.
cool, I saw chata mustiel talking, sisbachet nam khadnut open. Open at cool, I saw chata mustiel talking. She was just saying numbers over and over. Yeah, she was just counting over and over and over. So if you're not familiar with Salish, you would think that I was rambling on about something, but I'm just going up to 10 and then down to 1, up to 10, just saying the numbers over and over. So that having that accountability, right, of somebody in there who knows what you studied, who knows, it. And I think we talked about this in one episode or somewhere, where we talked about having committee members that don't know the content that we're studying, and not having that guidance, but then also not having that accountability for them to say, no, that's wrong, or no, you shouldn't do it that way.
I really consider myself fortunate, because I did have Dr. Janine Pease on my committee, and that was, didn't realize, I knew it was important to have a Crow person on my committee, but I didn't realize how important it was until I got to my findings and wrote about them. And, my dissertation chair, was really, really helpful, very supportive, really willing to learn the Indigenous research methodology with me. But when it came to some of those finer things that were just really connected to being a Crow person, Janine was able to help pull that stuff out and help me write about it. Like there were parts about relationship and advice giving and advice seeking in the Crow culture, and I knew the importance of that, but I didn't even write about it. And so when I hinted to it, Dr. Pease was like, you really need to talk about how the importance of this relates to what you did. And so there were things like that I'm really grateful to not only this group, but being able to have some of those conversations with Shondine way back in the beginning, but to the people on my committee, the Indigenous people on my committee, because I think they held me to a level of accountability that I really wouldn't have had if it was all non-Native people on my committee.
Yeah, I hear you. Anybody else relating experience in this for this question we have before us? Camille, Marty, Aaron, what you got? Can you hear me? Marty's saying nothing. Well, Marty, you did you do a master's, Marty? Did you complete a master's?
Yes.
Or did you go straight PhD?
Oh yeah,
you did do a master's.
Defended a thesis.
Yeah. So what was that process like, and what was your general content area?
Well, I focused on looking at tribal sovereignty through more of a creative lens than like a legal standpoint, and I use visual anthropology as the way to do it, and how Native people creating films demonstrate sovereignty. But more related to what Selena was talking about was when I gave a speech, not a speech, but me and Aaron went down to LBHC and presented a project we were working on. And that, being in Crow and talking about Crow culture and Crow historical events, that was like the most nerve-wracking experience for me. And I had been giving presentations to classes throughout my academic career, and then teaching also, but being talking about Crow things in front of Crow people who potentially could know more than me, like Selena was saying, it's kind of gives you more of an accountability to be honest with yourself about what you know and what you don't know. And so being there was one of the hardest presentations I've ever had to do, just because of that fact. And it's funny though, because I was so nervous about that, I have another thing related to what Selena said about Janine Pease, and she happens to be my auntie. So afterwards, she was kind of like giving advice to Selena. She was kind of getting after me, saying, "Marty, you should have told these students here. You graduated from LBHC. You went through this process like they're doing. People need to hear that." And I realized that I kind of skipped over some of the more basic introductory stuff because I was so nervous to not make myself seem like a fool in front of my people. And it was being broadcast live on Facebook, much like this, what we're talking about with the technology. So there's going to be a lot more people listening to both me and Aaron, and it was
right.
It's a hard thing to do compared to just talking to strictly academic people.
Yeah, you can get away with a lot.
Yeah,
you can get away with a lot. You can tell a lot of stories to just academics, and they eat it up, man. You're the big Indian in the room. You're the big Indian in the room. You can just make things up. That's crazy. Okay. So that's similar to what Selena was saying, having her family in this virtual space, open to a wider audience. Really, that idea of the peer as a witness to hold you accountable is tops, it seems like. Yes?
Yep. Good recap.
Good recap.
Nice.
What about Aaron? So you were part of this. You've defended a master's. What is your experience? Is it similar, dissimilar? What you got?
Well, I would say it sounds like Selena had a real positive experience, I think, for the most part. That helps a lot, I would think. Right?
Yep.
Would you say?
Yep.
Kind of encouraging, and like you don't lose motivation when you have people who are there. So your confidence level is probably quite a bit different. Yeah.
Yes.
I think with me, I wouldn't say I had a bad experience, but it was kind of cumbersome, right? Because on paper, I'm an archaeologist. That's what I am, but my thesis was mainly ethnography. So I think that was kind of freaking people out because the discipline of anthropology, although it's presented as being kind of this general study of humans, it's still very like categorized. Like, oh, are you a linguistics guy? Are you a forensics guy? Or where my thesis was more ethnography and cultural resource management kind of. And so I think that kind of was not handled real well. So my defense in a lot of ways to me was like an actual defense. Like I was actually defending my work for most of the process.
Yeah.
The actual defense part was more of a ceremony. Like it was by that point they were going to push me through anyway. But the weeks leading up to that with the editing and sending chapters and getting pages back and things like that got kind of weird. And when you're a young scholar, it's really easy to get kind of offended by things. You know, looking back, I probably wouldn't be offended now. I would just it would just be whatever. But back then, I mean, it's presented to you like these are the gatekeepers that are, you know, this is how you're going to get this. You got to go through them, when really it's like, yeah, whatever, dude, you know, like I'm just going to do my thing. And so, but I will say, I agree with Marty. For me, the presentation in Crow was astronomically more nerve-wracking than my defense ever was. I don't have a problem kind of fighting, I guess, for what I believe in and how I want to present my work. But it was nerve-wracking when me and Marty were standing in front of what at the time was said to be the largest cultural talk at the college they've ever had. So Tim Bernardis was like, this is the most we've ever had here. And it's like, well, don't say that to us. Like,
right before you go on.
And these guys are judgmental. Really judgmental.
We had like relatives, we had elders there, we had like young people. And so it was like,
people you owed money to
from back in the day. And ex-girlfriend. Yeah. Fortunately, I wasn't in the education crowd then, so my ex-girlfriends didn't show up. No, I'm just
but they were watching you on Facebook. So
yeah, and just they kept typing in the comments and then deleting, then typing the comments and deleting. And it was capital letters. But as far as how we disseminate our information, Crows, like many tribes, believe that once it's done in public, the public is how things are authorized. So they say, announce it. Once it's announced, that's it. For me, when my thesis defense didn't feel that way. It didn't feel official.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I printed out a few copies of my thesis, you know, and I gave them to people that helped me with it. I was nervous about that, you know, but for the most part, everyone was real positive about it. But doing that talk with Marty and presenting our work, because this entire project has been me and Marty, and Kelly Dixon's involved in it, but for the most part, it was a idea born out of us, and like the film is all Marty, and so it's like to me that was like nervous. I was so nervous. But then part of me was like, well, we kind of have to do this. This is a part of Indigenous research as we present it to the public. Mm-hmm. And whatever comes back to us, that's what comes back to us, and we'll deal with it. But
it almost doesn't feel complete until you do that, right? That final step. It's like then it's left hanging, and then it's just that responsibility.
Yeah, and part of it is you take whatever criticism you get. But it's also the belief that criticism isn't dogma, right? So it's not concrete. Criticism is just like anything. In the old days when people would tell stories in Crow, they would have these storytelling sessions, and somebody would tell the story of, like, say, a battle, and then somebody else would say, your version was good, but this is how I heard it. And then they would tell their version. And there was no one took that as like, oh, he's saying I'm a liar, you know? And now we kind of have that, like, oh, he's attacking me. And where back then it was like commonplace to have the same story told 3, 4, or 5 different times in a night, but it's all by different people telling their version of the story. And so to me, I kind of accepted that, and I was like, well, me and Marty are telling our version of this. at least I am. I can't speak for Marty, but I'm open to whoever has criticisms and whoever wants to tell their version. But I don't believe in like empty criticism. Like don't just criticize our work because you didn't do it, you know? And academics are kind of bad for that. Yeah. Like, if you did a project before that person did it, instead of saying, man, I've had that idea for a long time, I'm glad you did it, I just never moved forward on it, they would say like, well, I've been working on this proposal for years and they went and did it. And there's kind of a tone to things like that. And so learning to kind of deal with those critiques and criticisms and on both sides, non-Indian and tribal perspectives, it's like that was for me. But that's also part of like the authorization of the work we do has to go to the public. It's not secret. It doesn't go on a shelf hidden somewhere. It has to be there. Right. So
yeah, and it may sound like we had some major criticism after our presentation from what Aaron's saying, but we actually had a pretty good response, and it was surprising to me how many people came up and just kind of, basically they just showed us respect for just doing some kind of work with Crow culture or wanting to talk about it or share it. So on that, and being me and Aaron both are saying like it was nerve-wracking, and that's the most nervous we've been for this kind of presentation, and we've done this same presentation a few times before, the same one, and so we had all those kind of ideas in our head. So it was kind of surprising when people were coming up, and they weren't just our relatives coming up and telling us good job, and they just were encouraging to keep it up. And I get that kind of people say this a lot, and I've said it, how trying to learn a language like the Crow language, for me, you're kind of nervous, and then sometimes if you do make a mistake, people might laugh, but we laugh a lot anyway. But that's one of the fears, is you'll kind of be ridiculed for saying something wrong. But I think this might be a good example to just kind of take those steps and learn a language, and who cares if someone laughs. More often than not, I bet people will be encouraging and not criticize you. So I think that's kind of a good example of just to kind of, in academics or otherwise, just take that step towards what you want to do, and good things will happen.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Do you? I was just gonna say, the fear of being ridiculed or like teased, I think is not as bad as like the fear of letting your community down. And maybe that's like where some of that added pressure really starts to escalate. At least that's how I feel. I mean, I know I could get teased nonstop about whatever.
Should we start?
But like to feel that, like, I like.
Yeah, and I think some Native scholars or Native professionals, they have that pressure of, I'm gonna let my people down. So then the attempt never happens. They don't even they'll avoid
totally
those things that maybe require like Native people to be a part of it. So they'll go into professions that don't require that, where that notion's not going to be brought up, So it's weird. Like I think Native scholars have different kinds of pressures. Like I think all researchers, they overdo it on certain types of things, and so there's stress about research. But I think Native scholars deal a lot with like kind of like a guilt, like who am I to do this? Sometimes like you kind of go through a stage in your research where you're like, am I even the right person to do this? And there's like fear. There's like a fear that's trained in us to be like, we shouldn't be talking about things like this. And I went through a stage where I was like, we shouldn't talk about this. We shouldn't talk about this. I don't have the right to talk about it. But I'm kind of getting past that, partly because my confidence is growing in research, but also like the cultural backing. There's people that I've grown confident in. They culturally back me. So they and like Selena said, men have to have the right to speak in public in Crow, and I was given that. So that actually helped me, like gave me a lot of confidence. So when they give me the right to speak in public, it's like a thing, like this was at a Sundance and they do it in public and in front of a bunch of people, and they announce who I am, what I've done. And then they say from now on, he's part of what they call Ajipilea, which is like people who speak in public. Right. And so for me, that kind of gave me like confidence, even in every work I do, anything related to culture, because now I'm saying someone stood up in front of everybody and vouched for me, you know? And so that did a lot for me, you know?
That's important.
That's interesting. And it kind of plays into, I guess, a need that we might see that's lacking in this whole academic research process. And if we could rewrite the books on it or rewrite the procedures, that the idea of your peers being a part of your dissemination would be pretty important. But I'm curious, Sarah, you defended a dissertation. What was your experience? Were you near your homelands, or were you near a native community in which you had to answer toward, or what was your experience?
No, I think mine was very different from the examples we've shared so far. So I did have one native person on my committee, but she was at a different university, so she wasn't local and kind of involved on that local scale with my project. And the work that I did was pretty heavy into remote sensing and forestry and like stand dynamics, like nitty gritty on that side. So the little bit of culture that I did include, I heavily relied on that one native committee member, even though she was at a different university. And as far as the crowd that I presented to, I think the only other native person in the room was my mother. And other than that, it was completely non-native community. So, but I did take the research though and present, to folks there at Mescalero who I primarily worked with on my dissertation. And by far, kind of similar to what folks are saying here, that was the most nerve-wracking and it is a sensitive subject. So, I guess my situation was a little different, but I did feel like I had to defend it, but more on that, not so much the cultural stuff, but more the actual forestry components.
Yeah.
And that is nerve-wracking. I mean, you really have to put yourself out there and you really got to know your stuff and be prepared to answer as many questions as they want to throw out at you. And just be prepared for them to shoot holes in your project and be prepared for.
That seems to be the norm in STEM. I don't know why, but really harsh, really get on you. And they want you to cite authors off the top of your head and, write formulas that you had in high school and memorize how to.
Well, it's weird too. Like in science, in all fields of science, there's this like, I don't know if it's like a competitive need to like outcite each other.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, like, all right, okay, you read all that. And
I know. Your whole introduction is you don't say nothing, you just cite what everybody else said.
And then it's like,
isn't that sad?
It is
like,
sad.
It is.
Well, it's pointless.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I mean, it serves some function where it shows that you've read the literature that's out there.
I got a question.
But
I got a question for you all.
Yeah.
I got it. Yeah. The doctors are fighting back.
Yeah, well, actually, it's a very necessary thing. The citation.
Drank the
Kool-Aid. Drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Selena's like, don't tell me this.
Okay, go. What's your question? I
just went through all this. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, go. Question.
My question is as a big part of doing research, especially in the thesis and dissertation realm, not necessarily in publication, but like in articles, but the literary review, right? The literature review. Now, okay, yes. Is that a necessity in research that's heavy in oral histories, like in interviewing people. Like, for example, mine was really carried by 4 or 5 different people that I was interviewing, and there's not much of a literature review, and there's not much, but that seems to be a big component.
I'd say yes. Yeah, I'd say yes, but I don't think the length of it is necessarily an issue. I think if you've shown that you've looked at and dug up what other people have done related to your topic, it doesn't have to be hundreds of pages. It just has to show that you've captured what's out there in the literature. It just happens to be that some disciplines have more published documents than others.
Yeah, that's the heart of it. Yep.
I have another
question. Wait, now, okay. Well, I was going to ask Camille a question, but go ahead. Let's hear what you got. No, I want to hear what you. No, you had the eagle stick, the stick with the eagle head on it. So you go, and then I'll, because mine's going to transition us into something else.
Mine's more about citation.
Get on it.
So
let's hear it.
Like, for example, this happened in some work I've done over the years, and I'm hell bent on making this work, but I can't seem to get people to jump on board. I'll use this book. There's Tom Yellowtail's book about the Crow Sundance. I'll use that as an example. It's written and edited by Orrin Fitzgerald, right? It's a great book, but all the content is all from interviews done with an older man named Tom Yellowtail, who ran different ceremonies, mainly Sundance stuff in Crow. So what I started doing whenever I would come across, because really what I'm doing is citing information that Tom Yellowtail is giving the reader, not what Orrin Fitzgerald is giving the reader. And he's a cool guy. I'm not dogging him. So what I do, and no one likes it, but I do it, is when I cite him and I put the excerpt or something in the document, I put Yellowtail / Fitzgerald, and then the year of the publication, right? And the page number and year of the publication. Now, there's no citation style that I'm aware of that asks you to put in the person being interviewed in the publication. You just put the author of the publication. What do you guys think of that?
That seems pretty important. I think that's some pretty.
I did that.
Go ahead.
With,
Go ahead, Selena.
The Chief Plenty Coup book. I put coup, COUPS. Yeah, Coops. And then dot. And I read it somewhere though. I didn't make it up on my own. I saw.
So you've seen this somewhere?
Yeah, I saw the example somewhere. I didn't use a slash. I just put coup, comma, what's Linderman, comma, 20 whatever, 19 whatever. I don't even remember. I should remember, but I don't. 2008?
No, 28. 1928.
Oh, 1928. No, was it? Okay, yeah.
When Linderman wrote the book? Yeah, it's like 1928.
Sorry.
We'll look it up later.
I wrote it 1 billion times. You think I'd remember?
It might have been I know Pretty Shield was 33 or
it's okay.
31, something like that.
Anyways, my point was,
but you
didn't make
so
it.
You read it.
I saw it somewhere. Yeah.
So if anyone listening to this podcast knows where we can find that, let me know, because I couldn't. I didn't. And I know it's kind of frowned on because they're like, well, it's Fitzgerald's manuscript. And it's like, well, I mean, it's not though.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like saying an elder once told me.
Yeah. It's exactly like.
You don't know who that person is. You don't know who, where, what, why.
And so.
But you're going to give some credibility to the
that
informant.
Leads me to part 2 of the question. I'm only saying part 2 because it's a whole new question. Okay. But
this is part 2, subsection 1.
2.1. I know. I hear Cameron.
She's just waiting to jump in.
But I got you guys here. I called this.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
Sarah's like, I'm out of here. I called you guys here.
I'm hungry.
Hey, I have the talking.
Oh, Selena's out too.
Sorry.
I got you guys
Eagle-headed
here.
stick.
Now you have to
Like,
like
I'm
con
just-
people into.
You ever notice they
listening
make
to-
that?
Ah!
And
John's
that's
like,
not
what
even
are you doing?
eagles. Don't
not-
even make that
It's not
sound.
even an eagle.
Oh,
This
wow.
This
You
is
got
my
jumped
sacred
on.
medicine object.
Let's get to
Okay.
question 2, subsection B,
Okay.
What's your
part
part
A.
two? Part two.
This actually got brought up. Like the way I was raised to cite information was say Marty told me about the Pease family history. So then I said, I learned about the Pease family from Marty, who learned it from so and so. And then you start telling your story, right? But you say his
Yeah.
name. You don't
Mhm.
say I learned it from consultant 1, or you don't give him a fake name. You ever seen researchers give people fake names? A pseudonym? Is
Yeah.
that what that's called?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah, that's what
Is
it's
it to
for,
protect
but
their identity?
it's counter to
or
everything I've been taught. So like in my thesis, I said Elias Goza had told me this. I would feel like it's wrong of me not to me to say some dude told me this. That's rude. I think it's completely rude.
Mhm.
It's like,
Mhm.
no, Elias told
It's
me,
not
and
giving
Elias
full
learned it from his dad, Cardi, and like so forth and so on. Like that's kind of how you do it. That's how I was taught. So that actually got brought up in some of the office sessions I had with my advisors and stuff. And they're like, well, are you sure you want to use their names? And I'm like, where's all these myths like coming from that Indians don't like their names being said, or like, you can't look at me in the eyes, or
Yeah.
like, I don't know what all this stuff is. Like, what is?
I still
Yeah.
don't do
I
that.
never do it.
Yeah, don't look at
I'm
him.
doing it right now.
Yeah. Look away.
Like, well, yeah, you don't stare someone down, right? But anyway, yeah, I just, what do you guys think? Should you say the person's name? Yay or nay? Rubber stamp? Yes. Deny stamp?
Yeah, I think yes myself, but unless the person specifically says, but don't tell anybody that I told you that.
Yeah,
You've heard that
I don't
before.
use them. I don't use
Yeah,
them
yeah.
then.
Mhm.
But what if they tell
Yeah.
you it's really good, but they just don't want people to know that was their
Yeah.
experience?
I don't use it.
Or what if
Yeah.
Yeah,
if
they
it's
wanna be
tied to that
anonymous.
notion we've been talking about, where they don't want to say, oh, since I said it, it's the truth, or since I said it, it's the right story. So maybe some people don't want their name used because of that reason.
Mhm.
Kind of like we don't brag about ourselves. Maybe that's tied into it. Because I've read like McCleary's book on the stars we know. He uses pseudonyms. And so I use the book in my class to talk about crow stories. And that's the kind of the impression I got. So the people who told the stories in that book don't maybe get ridiculed or argue about it. But that's interesting because McCleary does, he puts one story, but then he'll have two examples of how a story is told differently. So one example has some details that the second story doesn't, or there's kind of a thing, somebody else is responsible for something in the other story. So in that sense, there is sometimes disagreements in cultural stories and things, for example. And so maybe that's also another part of why pseudonyms are used. And I'm not sure, like Shandeen said, if the elder or whoever is talking to you requests not to have their name not used, then of course do it. But I also agree. I also agree with you, Aaron, about how if you're presenting the information, then it's good for you to not be bragging like you know this. You tell everybody who you got this information from. So it's kind of goes both ways for me too. So it's I'm confused again.
But
a lot of times I start talking and then at the end of it, I don't know what happened.
There's no answer.
Did 2 minutes go by, or have I been talking for 30 minutes?
Marty fried his hard drive.
Did I just see a UFO, or why did my dog and me switch seats in the car? The dog wasn't driving before, and it's 3 hours later.
You've had a vision. What was that on Thunderheart?
It's like yeah.
You just had a vision.
It's like this is what it reminds me of. Reminds me of like someone who's really good at beadwork, you know, and they bead something for somebody, and they say, "But don't tell anybody I beaded this for you." And they do that because they don't want to get asked by hundreds of people, "Can you bead this, and this for me?" They're like they want to have some anonymity, so they don't get bombarded with more orders. So I can see that in one way, and I know an individual like that who has that request of me, says, "Don't tell anybody that I did this or where I'm at or what I'm doing," because they kind of don't want to be bothered.
Mm-hmm.
But that's I get it, because when you present something, you want to have some credibility behind it, and if your credibility might come into doubt, you want to have some backing. Say, well, this person told me this, so if you want to argue with me about it, don't argue with me about it. Argue with them. I
always worry about like, if we can change people's names, then why don't you just make stuff up?
Yeah. And that's the danger with an elder once told me. Then you give some sage words about it, and it could be really your own thoughts. You're just prefacing it with something that you might think you could kind of use credibility.
And I was once told this, and then you just insert or your own whatever you want. And to me, that's like, I feel like people can verify my work if I say this story was told to me by so and so, who learned it from, who was told it by so and so. Now, also, there's this part. When I want someone reading my work, I want them to feel like they're learning from the sources I learned from, not learn from me.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
you're just
that
a
sounds
conduit.
Very righteous still, though. Aaron, you're just a conduit for the Lord.
Okay, take it back.
Sounds like you're an oracle.
You're the oracle. Want some cookies?
I'm merely the vessel which carries the word. And my hand is the sword. Yeah.
I'll put myself on mute.
Aaron, you're merely a conduit. Well, thank you.
Nothing more.
Nothing less.
Nothing more. But a large conduit. A wide orifice. A wide orifice of knowledge.
Oh, jeez. Oh, you said it twice now. So
it's going in. It's staying in.
You should do?
That might be one of those words.
Aaron's the orifice.
You know how you did those laughing tracks with us? You should do a thing where we take, like, say, like, Selena talks for a minute, 30 seconds, right? Maybe 30 seconds. And as she's talking, you take out like a 10-second piece, and then you put random bleeps in it. And then replay it back to us, and we'll just see what it sounds like. Like every time she says methodology or Crow Indian, you bleep it.
Then I went beep. And you should all go to beep. I'll work on that.
Fun, something fun for the listeners.
Yeah.
All of our people reaping the benefits of the conduits here.
Yeah, while we're off subject, by the way, I think we ought to give some props to Shondean Pete for organizing these and putting them together, editing them. So thanks a lot, Shondean.
I'm just a conduit.
Oh.
I'm just channeling your guys' strength, but thank you, sir.
Yeah, no, I say it to people all the time. I'm like, well, they'll say, well, what do you do? And I'm like, I just turned my computer on. I don't do anything, man. I'm not
You know what I think you do?
I coalesce.
Because you also coalesce.
We're just a couple of conduits coalescing.
Conduits and orifices.
saying orifices?
I know, it's making me like, oh God.
What's wrong with that word? Okay. No more saying orifice.
Nobody say
All
you're
right.
saying it.
You knocked Marty
Oh,
out.
no,
Marty's
Marty
gone.
left.
He refuses to come
Well,
back.
okay, so this is the deal. You guys talked about a number of really important things related to how we may or may not structure a set of suggestions for future work labeled as Indigenous research or a methodological approach grounded in Indigenous understanding. But is this the way? Is this the way? And that's the question I had for Kamia, because I think Kamia, you completed a master's, yes, and yours is probably unique among all of ours because you didn't have to defend your work orally in an oral defense. Is that correct?
It was
completely written.
Yeah. So it was different because I I'd finished my program. I'd finished all my courses, and the only piece that was left was the writing, and that was when I started teaching. And I had a pretty cool advisor who supported what I was doing, and so she gave me a lot of room to try and think about these things and figure out what was going to be useful to me. I didn't really have any interest in writing another paper at that point because I'd done that. And right. So I wanted to find something that would work for me, like would actually do something. And it took a while. It took quite a while. And she had several opportunities for me to work with other teachers, and it actually the project went over the course of a couple of years, actually. And so that was really different. But like I said, the advisors were talking through the ideas with me, and they knew what I was working on and how I was doing it. So when I finally just, all right, let's finish this so I can get a degree, I wrote it up. And kind of the unique part of that was that, sure, I'd been talking with my family about the stuff I was doing, but when I wrote that was the first time I'd had them read anything I'd written. And so,
Really?
first time. And so their response, like I was nervous as hell. But you know, they seemed to catch on right away and to think that it made sense, that it was not some kind of ridiculous academic thing, that, you know, they liked it. So that was a lot of reassurance to me. And then so I wrote it, I submitted it, and then I had to go into Missoula and meet with my advisors. And we had dinner and talked about like some of the details of it. And I was waiting for like that defense where it's the kind of scrutiny, or I'm supposed to do some kind of formal presentation. And the end of the night, I'm like, am I supposed to be doing something? Like, no, you did it. It's done. This was it. So that was
pretty anticlimactic.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, cool. All right. And then again, it was kind of like one of those things where, well, I really enjoyed visiting with them, but what's the, I don't know. Maybe if I was looking for some kind of accountability, or I was looking for something that seemed to be like a formal vouching of, yeah, this isn't you sitting in your office drinking too much coffee kind of thinking, right? And I didn't really get any of that. But so my it's a really long story. Sorry. It was all about teaching, right? Teaching, and so it was supposed to be useful. Really, what was the validation of that project was the stuff I was doing in class. And honestly, like half the time, I don't know, is it working? Like, I don't know whether they care or whatever. But
yeah,
the thing that kind of like, oh, okay, I can do this. This works. Is my classes. I noticed that they were starting to heckle me, right? Like teasing me and engaging in that kind of conversation. And I think, okay, they're teasing me, and it could be kind of like a little bit embarrassing, but mostly it's they're actually thinking about this, and they're thinking about it in a way that requires them to like, all right, if you're so smart and if that's the way it works, then what about this? Like, oh, yeah, all right, you're ahead. Go with that. Do that then. Right. So, yeah, a really different situation. But
yeah,
again, I mean, trying to like pull out those ideas that you're talking about in terms of like the audience. My audience was by and large students, and they provided that accountability because they would be mean with their teasing, or they would just not pay attention, right? They would turn off. And that gave me that. And, you know, if we're all talking about this and interested and having a good time and laughing about it, and they could notice the things that were ridiculous, then all right, sounds good.
yeah. Pretty interesting experience. I think everybody here seems like they've had a little different take on the same thing, which is disseminating academic information. But really, you know, what we're trying to do is, I don't know if we're trying to do this or if we even want to do this, but suggest a different way. Everything we've talked about here is a writing product, right? A product written in English. Well, of course it is, because that's the language we were all raised in. At least that's as far as I know. And we're it's structured in a very familiar format. Just the fact that we all understand what a literature review is, where it goes, we can have a discussion about that. Says we're ingrained. We're ingrained in this idea of how research is conducted and written up. But is there a different way? Is there a new way we can do this? I seen a verbal yes from Selena. How do we do this? Let's
okay.
Wait. Hold on 1 second. Okay, no. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, well, I actually don't know how to do it, but Sean, I keep name dropping people. Anyways, one of the faculty in film.
Drop the name.
What's her name, Marty? Sean O'Connor or Sean
O'Brien?
Sean O'Brien.
Yeah, Sean O'Brien.
Contacted. Well, she's holding a class that she's teaching students who are doing research to create film versus a dissertation. So I think, you know, before everybody buys into it, you'll still create a dissertation, but it'll accompany with it'll be accompanied with a film. And so when she first approached me about that, I thought it would be really cool, because I think somebody would rather listen to a short, like, I don't know, digital story about my research and my findings versus read 160 whatever pages of a dissertation. And so I think that's one way that it can start to look different. And I'll tell you when I'm done with it if it really even works. But
Oh, you're gonna do it? You're gonna do it. Oh, okay.
You're taking that class?
I'm not going to take the class. I'm just going to work with. I'm going to work with her, or mainly Antonio, and she was thinking of film, like an actual, like, I don't know what a length of a film is, and I was like, no, I'm thinking more of
feature
length film. No, I'm just kidding, like a documentary, and I was thinking more of like a 5 to 10 minute type, digital story kind of thing. So anyway,
I thought you were going to say a 5 to 10 episode.
Oh,
yeah, the next
shockumentary.
No.
A mockumentary.
A mockumentary for sure.
Mockumentary.
Where the camera's moving.
Wait, yeah.
Cinema verite.
Oh man, Selena, you put me right in there.
Yeah, I was feeling it.
Selena,
feeling
or
it.
Ken Burns.
Let's do this. Let's listen to this next song and let's keep this conversation going, because this is important. And I don't know if you guys see the pencil I'm shaking at you guys. That's authority. That's an authority. Oh, this is important. We're going to continue it. Okay, let's listen. Ready? Here we go. So that's the parade song, one of many parade songs that existed, and there's really a number of different reasons why a person in the olden days, I don't know what you want to call it, but one of those. There was many different reasons why a person would engage in a parade or initiate a parade through the camp. One of the reasons was perhaps warriors returning from a raid or a war. Maybe a warrior wants to tell his deeds, so he'll start a parade up. Maybe somebody got married and they want to affirm that with the camp. Or maybe they were going to celebrate the war deeds. So there was many reasons why the parades would be held, and there was many different types of songs. This was one type of song for the I think it was a evening ride song where they just kind of have a good time, just to enjoy their evening and get on their horses and parade around camp. Oftentimes you'd get a married woman jumping on the horse of an unmarried man just to tease around. It's just a chance to have a good time and play around. Sometimes even when they were leaving their camp, going on to a hunt, they'd all kind of parade out of camp like that, kind of going on a dangerous journey. So served many, many different purposes. And this song then kind of reminds me, or even all these different types of parades and parade songs reminds me that there's many different ways in which we can inform our local communities, even our academic communities, of our research, and how we've adopted, not by choice, but we've adopted this way of disseminating what we know and what we do, because that's the way that academics wants it. They want a written document in a certain structure, and they want a oral defense and a dissertation published, and maybe, if you're lucky enough, a couple journal articles published in well-known journals. But the question I have, or really the dialogue I want to get started, really centers around some talks that we've had at the center about coming up with a different different way of communicating our research, whether it's written or whether it's presented in a different fashion. And Selena came up with an example of a digital product, movie clip, or a movie of some sort. I'm wondering if anybody wants to comment on some other ways in which you think we can emulate a way that would, one, bring back some traditional manner of sharing knowledge. Are we too deep? Are we too deep in it? Can we even change it?
No, I don't think we're too. Oh, I don't think we're too deep. What do you mean too deep?
Are we so accustomed to this academic way
If it
that we're
if we as a people can learn academics anyway, there's no doubt in my mind we can change it to fit us.
How do we do it then?
Oh, I don't know that.
That's like somebody saying, well, anything's possible. Oh yeah, well, that's possible. How do you know it's not possible?
A good try, a good honest try, and you don't have no in your heart, you can accomplish anything.
Right.
Earlier I said to Cammy the phrase "pull yourself up from your bootstraps."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you pull yourself down if you pulled your bootstraps? It'd pull yourself down.
Yeah, you'd be in a little ball. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So if you were laying down and you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, your legs would be in the air, or your feet. Yeah, the physics of that doesn't make sense. Unless your bootstraps on your back.
What?
I don't know.
In the world?
No. I don't know what's going on here.
Song is used to verify the works of man quite a bit, whether it's the accomplishments in love, the accomplishments in battle, things that someone has done.
Mm-hmm.
My great-grandfather, Samson Burdenground's song says, you who had never owned an old horse. It says those words in there, and it's kind of a homage to him always having good horses, right? And Susie Oakey's song talks about her going places and speaking to people. It's acknowledging the accomplishment of an individual, but verifying accomplishment is done by the public, not by the individual. Like I can't go to someone and say, hey, make a song about me. Even just saying that right there sounds funny, you know?
Yeah.
Hey, bro. So I'm going back to, I think, episode 1, 2, or maybe even 3, when I talked about that old lady from Pryor. Oh, John's grandma, Selena.
Yep.
They made that song about her where she had won a deed during a mock battle. So they acknowledged it by composing a song about her. And that song is still sung today as a victory song, you know. And it's a non-war exploit, but it's of the same. They considered it at that time to be a legitimate deed. So they speak about her. She was riding a gray horse, and that song speaks about her riding a gray horse. But so there's ways to acknowledge, you know. So I think in order to change the academic system to fit us, we first have to change how we acknowledge the work that we do. How do we do that in like a culturally healthy manner? Once we figure that out, then we'll be able to, that kind of changes intent, right? Because if every tribal scholar knew that his mom or his aunt, especially that mean auntie, you know, was going to read his work or her work, that scholar might approach their work differently.
Yes.
So the verification of accomplishment, that has to happen first. At least the way I'm thinking right now on a Wednesday night.
Yeah. No, I agree. And we've seen that demonstrated pretty clearly, that there was a difference in what we thought we were, or our demeanor when we were presenting, when we knew that community members or family members were in the crowd. Yeah, that might be a good first step. But to enter in things like the song and reverting back to some traditional practice, that seems like that's something that's got to happen in the community first, because how can we ask of academics to change, even tribal college academics, if the community is not even
How about this?
Let's
put on a scalp dance here in Arley to acknowledge our award, our NSF award. $3.5 million ain't nothing to be. That's a lot of money. That's a major accomplishment for the feds to say, let's hand this over to these clumsy little Indian kids and see what they come up with, so.
I don't consider myself clumsy, but I know what you mean.
Of course you wouldn't consider yourself clumsy. I do, though. I consider you clumsy. No, I think that'd be
that's a good idea, and that's a good way to propagate a way that's been started, and to find a venue and a purpose again. And I can see that occurring across many other different tribal communities, but tapping into the people that know and who would say yes, that's probably a worthy thing to do. That can be kind of difficult.
Yeah,
but if we had, but I mean, it's not impossible. It's just you just got to do it.
Nothing's impossible.
It's probably being done. We're just, because it's not a structure that you would see in academia, we're not identifying it as that. I mean, I think we're probably all individually doing that on a different level with the way we normally carry ourselves in our community. So the way you communicate with what you're doing at school or what you learned, or, it's probably happening. It's just not formalized, I guess. But the other thing that came to mind is, I think, really bridging that gap of what you're doing I'm just going to give an example. So I talk to my dad probably anywhere from 3 to 7 times a week. And every time throughout the whole part of the whole doctoral program, I probably talked about what I was doing in my classes, in my research, in, all of that academic stuff. I probably talked about it like maybe a handful of times. And if we start integrating what we're actually learning, what we're applying, how we're understanding things, like if we start just bringing those ideas into the conversations of people with people in our families, I think that's one way to start, like, figuring out how we are going to disseminate this to our communities. Because, as soon as I tell my dad, oh, I did this or I learned this, he's like, oh, you should tell so-and-so, or, like, he gives me ideas of what I need to do to either find out more or, give more information or whatever. So those are just some initial thoughts with that question.
And so I bet some of those were some of the most helpful things in your research.
Yep.
I bet.
Yep.
Us Indians were always kind of late, on things. Especially, like, imagine, like, your grandpa, Selena, like, doing this work and your grandpa still being here. Philip was your grandpa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man, that would be awesome. So, but we can make it better, by figuring out so people don't make those mistakes where they don't miss those opportunities. Because I think about times where I'm doing work now and I wish, like, man, if my grandfather was here, I could bounce ideas off him.
Yep.
And he's not. But I would hate for my kids to have that be a regret, to be in the late, doing it late, So maybe that should be part. I don't know how you do that, how you do all this research and have enough foresight to see where you can have those moments of, like, regret in your work. Because unlike a lot of other fields, I think tribal scholars, we're all inherent like preservationists, right? So we kind of do aspects of work that contribute to the preservation of our culture. So it's like meaningful in a sense, like we feel like it contributes to our own people. So that's why, like, I think, that's a little bit different. I'm not sure, but it just made me think of that when Selena was talking, because that would have been awesome, right? But we don't want our kids to go through that, to be like they were too late,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So it seems like there's like an incremental step that we have to take, whether it's simultaneous or whether it's disjointed steps, but there's work that has to be done in the community to normalize first the idea of the use of songs in particular instances. Of course, that's not the same everywhere. I'm sure it's different, in different reservations that you go to in tribal communities. There's probably a pretty intact structure of song use, and but then to blend that with this academic process, there's some pretty key steps that need to take place, and you guys mentioned some really important ones, like opening it up to a wider audience so you can feel some validation from your own communities, opening it up so you can have experts in your own communities see the work you're doing. But the one that I really struggle with is how is there and do we even want to restructure the way in which we write up our research? Is that a necessity, or do we just kind of roll with what we got for now and then see how that changes as we integrate some of these other processes into that research structure?
I mean, I guess my first thought about that is that if we're changing who we're talking to, then we need to change the way or if we're changing who our audience is, then that's going to change our message. It just does. Our audience has expectations. So if we're writing these academic papers and we're imagining that it's going to be published in a journal that academics read, we know their expectations. And so in some ways we conform to that. We decide, all right, this is how we're going to meet those expectations so that they will understand what we want them to. And if we decide that that's not who we're interested in communicating with, and we try to communicate in the same way, it's just weird. Like, so I guess it just, that main shift, if we shift our audience, it's got to influence everything else.
Right. So it has to change. It has to change in some way. But how? That's the big question that I'm always wondering. How do we change that?
All right.
Is it written? Is it oral? I mean, we've talked about videos. We've done presentations.
I think it's all of it. I think
go ahead.
You have to cast a wide net. So if the hope and the belief is that Indian people are going to read our work, we have to have it available in all formats and all avenues.
Right.
And two, I mean, I guess I'm just thinking about, so we do a lot of this writing because that's an academic expectation, right? You publish to promote that, and that's a really kind of academic thing. But if we're just trying to communicate with a community, I mean, that's different. And I'm trying to figure out where writing fits in with that. I mean, I'm sure that there are ways that would be useful, but and now we're in a weird situation where we can't get together, but that seems to be those conversations, right? Just having the time to be around people and to talk about those things and to talk about this random stuff that we talk about too along the way. Right? I mean,
it gets pretty random.
Yeah.
Yes.
Somehow that seems like it. You get people to listen to you. I mean, because most of the time, so with something like this, right, a podcast, you've got just a minute or a couple of minutes to get your point in. to say what you want to say, and then like you got to keep moving.
Yeah.
You got to whatever to hold that attention, and
yeah,
that's weird too. I mean, like, what? How can that possibly replace hanging out with people for like an afternoon and conversation that gets picked up and passed on to somebody else, and you go, you know, like that's
yeah,
not gonna be replaced by writing, I don't think.
Yeah. So really evaluating what a community or tribe's expectations are would be an important first step to prescribing something that a person would want to do with their research.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think each tribal group might have different expectations depending on the level of loss of traditions, or I don't even know if that even comes into play, but I just don't know. Maybe you got a super techie reservation, and they want to just a succinct soundbite. I don't know. You don't know what's going on out there.
Super techie reservation.
Super techie res. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know. A lot to think about. A lot of work to do. Marty or Selena, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Before my dissertation, I would have said, yeah, let's just get rid of the writing part of it, and let's just disseminate our our findings or whatever orally. But really, writing was an important piece of the process of me figuring out what I needed to present. Because it was funny, because every time I talked to somebody initially, I would talk about a different thing, just depending on what was on my mind at that time. But really, the writing process was important for me to identify what was important throughout the whole process, not just what I was working on that day. So I think there is still a place for writing in that process, but just how, and some people want to read, some people would, that's how they learn, that's how they process things, is by reading it. And so instead of just having this one way of disseminating the information, I mean, I think that's one of the other ideas we need to think about, is what are other ways. I mean, we've all done it already, because we've defended or presented our research more than once, and different, depending on the venue, it looked different, right? So I mean, maybe for us, that's part of the process, is in this place, this is how we present it. In this place, this is how we present it.
Yeah, I see. That is pretty important. The written piece can be a good tool. Marty, what do you think? Any last thoughts?
I think when we're talking about how our research is going to get out to the public and potentially our own tribe, and I think a lot of us, hopefully our own tribe, would want to see what we're up to, see what we're researching. And I know we're all kind of in a little bit different disciplines here in the podcast, all the participants. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I apologize if you don't want me speaking for you, but I think it's kind of safe to say that all what we're doing, we're Indigenous people, we're natives, and we want to represent our people well. And ultimately, what we're researching, I think, and this is where you can correct me or you don't want me speaking for you, but I think all of us, our goal is ultimately we want to some way improve people's lives, improve our own tribe's lives. And so if you guys agree with me, what do you think? Yeah.
Just a conduit, man.
First, apology not accepted. Apology not accepted. Just the conduit.
So.
Yeah. Well, I think.
No, I was just going to say, I'd like to think that the work I do contributes some way. I don't know how, but I'd like to think it's a positive contribution to my people. Yeah. Well, and like I tell people all the time, my work is focused mainly on the Crow, but I would like to think that if another person from a different tribe reads it, it should spark maybe a way they can conduct research, or they can say, hey, I have something comparable that I'm going to go in the steps that he did, because he's telling something that makes sense to me, or saying something that makes sense to me. So I would like to, because I know that I've read papers from other tribal people, and although it wasn't my tribe at all, and it was of great interest to me because of how they conducted their work. And I would pick things out of that would help me. So yeah, I'd like to think, man, you want to feel like you're helping, you know. I think that's the need, but again, we could always do better, you know.
I would share that same sentiment, you know. And I've met some scholars who that's not their goal, you know. They're out to make a name for themselves, and they're not interested in helping their communities at all. And oftentimes it's about, you know, putting a front on that's what they want to do, but ultimately you understand their intention is more to build their own name and sell books, I guess. I don't know. That's just a very critical.
Who buys books, man?
I know. Who does? Or reads them. Or maybe just buys them and not read them. Jokes. That's me.
Selena's
right
like, I buy books, and
I got a book. I'm on a book membership. Actually, I do have a book membership at Barnes and Noble. Well, I did. It expired.
Look at Marty showing off his books.
We were competing.
Oh, hey, I've got this book. I know.
I won.
Has anybody ever read Carlos how do you say that?
Castaneda.
The Teachings of Don Juan, a Yaqui way of knowledge.
I have an old CD of Yaqui bird dance songs. I think it's Yaqui.
Oh yeah,
it's Yaqui, but I can't remember. Deer dance. Maybe it's deer dance.
Deer dance.
Yeah,
that'd be interesting.
I think Selena's background.
Let's do this.
The opposite side of Marty's.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Right.
Wow.
Is that Prior Creek? Is that up Prior Creek?
That is. Oh my gosh! Just because we're being recorded, I don't know what creek. It's not Prior Creek.
Lost Creek.
Lost Creek.
Oh, that was fun up there, huh, Marty? Remember them Lost Creek days?
Yeah. That was crazy.
Yeah. We did an archaeology survey
crazy guys
on the top of Lost Creek, and it was like
right there.
Nuts. We were in the timber, so we were actually, I think, opposite of where that picture's taken. We're on the opposite side of the canyon in the timber, and it was something else. It was a bit hairy.
Did you guys write about it, or how are you going to disseminate that information?
I
there you go. Get them. I've never seen it. Selena's never seen it. Marty's probably seen it. You're not doing your job, man.
I'm all about. Oh, myself,
what is that?
Yo.
And selling books.
I had a guy tell me one time. I was interviewing a guy. I'll keep his name out of this, and he said, "You're just gonna take my knowledge and get rich." And I was thinking, man, part of me wanted to say, like, dude, nobody buys books, like, let alone like some obscure crow book. The people who will buy the book, it's gonna be like my aunt, my grandma, and then now every other crow is gonna want it for free. So,
hey, just send me a PDF of that book.
I don't need like the fancy one, bro. I don't need the fancy one, bro.
Yeah.
I'm like, when's the last time you went book shopping that was not for school or for work?
Oh, I know. Rarely.
Yeah, audience is pretty quiet now, isn't
it? I do all the time.
They are, yeah.
I go to
any fiction readers in the group? Fiction? No. Let's see.
Fiction readers? Yes, I've read fiction.
What? Louis L'Amour?
Just the American history book. Boom!
Whoa! Yes.
You're welcome.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Get them. Get them. All right, let's wrap this up. This is an interesting conversation. We didn't get very far. We got some great ideas. We got to start small. We got to infiltrate the community with some good things, and sounds like we have to really take a shotgun scatter approach. Go ahead.
What said a good sting?
Stings the nostrils. Yes, a good sting. We got to sting the community. Inject
like the murder
venom.
hornets.
The murder hornet. Yeah, a shotgun approach just to see what works. I think, and I've had this idea that I should be able to. Wrap academic information into something that's consumable in many different ways into the community. If I can't do that, I should never say that I've done Indigenous research, and I should never say I've done an Indigenous research methodological approach, unless 1 in 4 people can say, oh yeah, I know what he did, and this is what he did. I don't know. That might be pretty hard in larger communities, but I don't know.
It's feasible.
That's my thoughts. It's feasible. Let's do it. We're going to have to do it with our research that we do in the center. So it'll be a good testing, a testing zone. What do you call it? What is it called? When they shoot shells into a field, bombs. What is it called? A proving field. I don't know. Let's get out of here. We're done. Thank you for joining us on this episode. And to learn more, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at IRCSKC. You can find us also on Facebook and YouTube by searching SKC Indigenous Research Center. You can also visit our website at irc.skc.edu. Don't forget to join us next time as we continue our discussions on Indigenous research, Indigenous research methodologies, and Indigenous worldviews.
I think we established early on.